Good afternoon, Chair, Postman, members, Garrett and Bollendroff, staff and guests. The lobbies are open and the recording has begun.
Thank you. Thank you, Dustin. We will convene the executive management team meeting for Wednesday, March 8th, 2023. Happy International Women's Day, that it is. And nod to all our amazing women, many of them are on our executive team who you'll hear from today. We will start with a update on diversity, equity, inclusion from the manager of it, Jim Weatherly. There he is.
Good afternoon, Chair Postman. Good afternoon, members, Garrett, member Bollendroff, and the management team. Thank you for having me. Again, Jim Weatherly, he, him, his personal pronouns, and I'm your DEI manager. We've got a few slides here to update. Again, just welcome this afternoon and here to Women's History Month as well. I wanted to start and just kind of brag a little bit about our Diversity Council and its membership currently. The folks that you see highlighted are our newest members in council. We've welcomed and we continue to grow. And this is all kind of in the midst of more change for us as well. Many know that Letty Mendez is going to be leaving the agency the end of the program year. So those are some big shoes to fill. So we are having a lot of conversations as a council, again, planning for a retreat here this summer and welcoming new members and new ideas about projects that we're working on right now. This is a screenshot of our LCB intranet website where we're starting to house some of the DEIB affairs that we do. There's also a link here to council and some of the matters that we're doing or working towards. We're really proud of the fact that on the right side there of the screen, we've been able to link all of our business resource groups that currently exist, including our newest one, Happen, that's there at the bottom. And we've also tried to continue to link different areas, other websites, Office of Equity, different places where people can go and find resources around anything and everything related to DEIB. Other things that we're working on as well right now is a new employee orientation video that I'll talk about here in a little while also, but that's a big current project for us in addition to some of that restructuring with council, thinking about next steps and certainly how we can support our efforts with PAIR, which is our pro-equity anti-racism team. So speaking of PAIR, what you see there on the left side of the screen, these are all of the service lines that are part of the PAIR equation across the Office of Equity. There on the right, or excuse me, that was on the left, and on the right side of the screen there, what you see is again our current membership for PAIR here at the LCB, and the individuals highlighted are our newest members. We're really excited to welcome Officer Archie. She has been kind of working in the background here with Letty for that transition that'll happen down the road, but she will be our first officer joining this team, which we're excited for that input. Back in January, we onboarded and welcomed our new tribal liaison, Marla. She's a new addition, and I'm proud to announce that during the last NEO DEI training that we did, Rachel in real time, our new finance director, stepped up and said, I'd like to be a part of it. So we had the pleasure of meeting yesterday and kind of getting to know one another and looking forward to that input. And with Rachel's addition, that actually rounds out all of our divisions, are represented now across our PAIR team. So thank you to finance and thank you to everybody that has contributed, staff, if not themselves, to this work as we're moving forward. So just a reminder on the PAIR work, that previous slide showcased all the different service areas that we have an option or had an option as an agency to lean into. We as an agency or a PAIR team chose to focus on these three, and they're in no particular priority order. But again, we're looking at engagement and partnerships. The first piece of that, it's a required segment of the PAIR plan, is to complete what they call an EIR or an equity impact review. In order to do that, we need a fully realized team. So we do have the tribal liaison piece. We're still ready and kind of talking about welcoming community stakeholders. A big part of that push, thank you to member Bollendroff, we now have a new subcommittee within PAIR that is going to be meeting this month, 2, possibly 3 meetings, where we're really going to focus in on, again, some of those relational partnerships, how we can engage the community differently, which will support, then those other 2 priorities that you see there on the screen. The workforce equity piece of it is primarily focused right now on our current demographics, how we hire, how we retain, as well as, the belonging side of this. Once you're here, how at home do you feel? How comfortable are you with input? And do you know about other resources? And then, of course, the relational partnerships, we're excited about exploring that too. We already do a great job of that here at the agency, but building on that foundation that already exists, and then being able to weave in some of that DEI and belonging work within it as well. So this is kind of where I wanted to focus today. Pardon me. What you see on the screen, from the Office of Equity standpoint, we will be required at the end of the program year to submit what's called a quarterly performance tracker. It's a heavier document. It's pretty scholarly focused. So I wanted to kind of spend some time plain speaking what we've done over the course of this program year thus far. So what you see here is just our pair team work from the beginning. We started in May of last year, and that forming piece of this, a lot of that time was spent doing, of course, the required Office of Equity trainings like Rachel's in the thick of now as a new member. We spent some time talking about excuse me, white supremacy culture, some of those traits, both as a pair team council, but also as a management team. And I think throughout various divisions, even at the E&E retreat that you see showcased there as well. And then, as I mentioned before, we got our intranet site up and running, which we're always trying to improve upon. And then started some conversations about the longstanding culture document that was written here about maybe 10 years ago. Is that right, Rick? And thinking about what that looks like and what it could look like moving forward. Moving into Q2, we're still we're in this storming and forming phase where we're trying to figure out how we fit, this pair work fits within the work that we're already doing around DEI. We certainly welcomed, like I said, Marla joined, licensing was able to join, which I know is a huge lift in the midst of all the social equity planning that's been going on at that point. Prior to that and into the future, we had a consult with the Office of Equity to make sure that because we weren't a fully formed team and that we weren't able to do that EIR, that assessment yet, that we were still doing all right and that we were on the right pace, which is when we were kind of told it's okay to go, to go slow, to go fast. And Rick's looking at me like, yep, we got to keep doing that. So, and then at that point, we were able to identify those service lines that you just saw at on the previous slide. We attended the first annual equity summit as an agency. We've been talking a lot about how we do HR recruitment. We've seen various staff, Anita included, speak at different engagements with council, pair, management team about how we recruit, where we're looking, what that pipeline does look like and could look like in the future. And then we also had a DEI focused strategic planning session that Jessica and Anita took us through, I believe in November, where we were able to get even more feedback about where this work is already happening within the agency. Moving into this current quarter that we're in now, we like I said before, we're all represented in terms of all the divisions within PAIR. We are certainly looking at the results that were showcased at the employee survey breakfast. We are looking forward to some of that director search feedback, how that's shared out in terms of what we're looking for in our next leader. We were really excited, or I was very excited last week to learn that our community compensation policy, which is a required component for pair work, that Jessica Dang and many others in this team, that we are signed off on that, and that policy will be forthcoming here soon. So that's a big win for us as an agency looking at our pair work so far. And then, as I mentioned before, we have some subcommittees that are happening with Member Bollendroff around community engagement, but we also are forming and have formed a new subcommittee within our Diversity Council where we're really looking at BRGs. For any of us in the room or online that already subscribe to some of those, it's a lot of information. There's a lot of events. There's a lot of things happening constantly. And we felt like as a council, that's a lot to corral. So we were hoping in this subcommittee to figure out how we can pull that together similar to like when we do the Friday news share outs, and be able to put some sort of messaging out on a regular basis that points people towards perhaps what's happening the week of, perhaps what's coming in the month. So I'm really excited. We have our next council meeting next week to hear their thoughts and ideas on how we get that off the ground and rolling. And then, excuse me, looking towards the future here in this final quarter, we're hoping, based on the input that we received from this subcommittee around community engagement, that then we have a real rhythm and a real formula to who we're going to be looking for, who we're going to be inviting to that table from the community to help us continue in this work, including being able to actually do that EIR, that assessment again, where we may come back and say, these are the same service lines that we'd like to keep pursuing. We may go a different direction based on that input now between having a tribal liaison plus community members involved. So with that, we're kind of thinking about what's that communication going to look like? Are we going to need to do focus groups? What's the marketing? And then, we have the upcoming in June, we will be doing both the employee recognition event, where we're hoping to showcase this NEO new employee orientation DEI video that we did secure contracting for in February. We have shooting dates now for mid-April, and we're hoping to deliver that product by April, if not that May, and certainly be able to share that at the employee recognition event, if not sooner. And also in June, we are thinking about, we have actually planned now a diversity council retreat on June 21st, which I understand is a board meeting date as well. So we're hoping maybe to have some crossover there with board members. If they're in the area, it'd be lovely I think we're going to be at the Lacey Community Center, and Letty is busily planning that curriculum for the day. And then otherwise, again, just looking at different feedback that we've received from various survey results, things that management has shared with us, staff have shared with us. One of the biggest ideas that's sort of bubbling up beyond this theme about belonging and how we can celebrate that in the agency is this idea of a lending library. Some of our divisions, I think about licensing. I think about conversations at the management team level have talked about books or articles or things that have helped with these kinds of conversations. The Diversity Council is also very interested in that. And so we're going to be thinking about ways that we can sort of harvest those things, showcase them, have them somewhere maybe situated on our intranet, if not physically, some sort of libraries in our headquarters, maybe field offices. We just don't know yet. And then again, building on the S&P presentations and all this organizational change that we know we're constantly in, especially in the thick of a new director search, et cetera. We are really hoping to bring some of that organizational change knowledge and information tips on how to handle that kind of those stressors that can be, while we're also working with the wellness committee here at the LCB about, mindfulness and self-care with regard to all of these topics around DEI. And with that, that is the update on where we are right now. Any questions or any feedback?
One quick on the EIR. What is the process for developing that? And it goes to the statewide equity office, is that right? And they compile them all?
It's about a 32-page document. I printed an extra one off if you wanted to see that copy of it. That is just a series of questions that we're kind of already answering. It's asking where we're already engaged with the community. Speaking to Marla as our tribal liaison, there's specific questions for tribal liaisons to say, were you consulted about blank tribal affairs in your agency?
Okay.
So it's a kind of a litmus of sections and questions that then are supposed to, I guess, help us tailor what our service lines should be.
And will we be able to see the administration-wide results? Will that all be shared with the agency?
Absolutely. I mean, we still owe the Office of Equity a pair statement, which we still need to craft. That will need to be published. That will need to be circulated, as well as the actual formal strategic pair plan. So this is kind of the EIR is kind of that first step that hopefully then makes the latter pieces of it. And the Office of Equity is aware of where we are with this pace. They just said anything and everything that you're doing towards those end goals, capture them in the current strat plan. So that idea of the quarterly tracker, I think, is something that we're just trying to make sure we can move it into that so it doesn't look like year one of this. We really haven't been doing anything.
Right. Okay, good. Thank you. Other board questions for Jim?
I just have a quick comment, and that is to acknowledge the work of the pair team and the equity team. And, I think that it's important that all employees of the LCB know and understand that the board is behind this work. It's important work. It's not other work. It's not like we've got our real job and then we've got this on the side. This is all part of, and everything we do should be through this lens. And so I just wanted to make that comment. And Jim, thank you for your leadership in how you continuously remind us and lead us in a positive way. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jim, too. You're right. I agree completely. I know it's a priority for the board, so I appreciate that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is a legislative update with Mark Webster.
Good afternoon, Chair Postman and board members Vollendroff and Garrett. I started off the caucus update yesterday by saying it would be quick. So since I gave that one, this is one that's going to be even quicker. As I mentioned yesterday, all of our bills passed the Senate and one will be heard this week. That's the subpoena bill. We're still waiting to see when the social equity and the THC bill will follow. The House of Origin cutoff is today, so the legislature is moving a number of bills that have been pulled from rules. Many of them are bills that we've been tracking, throughout the session. So they're scheduled to take action this afternoon on bills like the Cannabis Commission bill that's been around for a number of years, the bill on the regulation of cannabis signage, 5363, the liquor license bill, 5291 from Senator Schessler, and the alcohol delivery bill 5448, which was one that we were opposed to during session. That one seems to be part of like a deal around the proposal to lower the BAC threshold for DUIs from 0.08 to 0.05%, the Senator Lovett bill. So haven't seen the out-of-state ownership bill on the calendar, but there's still a little bit of time. All of those are going to have to wait for some of the big, the 5 o'clock bills or the big kind of contentious ones. Last night, the House was up past midnight or 1 a.m. on a gun control measure. The Senate is currently taking up with the police vehicular pursuit bill. So that'll probably get them kind of wrapped around the axle for some amount of time, but they should have time to pass a few more of those. Any questions?
I saw something I will hand tip to, Cannabis Observer.
Yeah.
It looked like there might be linkage between the bill on outside investment and the
Right.
commission, since they come from two different.
Right,
sectors.
and they were kind of opposed to each other. Yeah, I've heard
Still
something.
Are they both still?
I've seen the commission bill on the order of consideration. I haven't seen the out of state,
Investment. Oh, okay.
the investment, but again, depending on time, they could certainly do that.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, and certainly the commission bill has some amendments on it as well. So I think they may be compromising a little bit to get over some of the opposition that was raised as it moved through the process.
Okay, good. Questions for Mark, the board? None? Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Licensing with Becky Smith, Licensing and Regulation Director. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair Postman and board members, Vollendroff and Garrett. I think I'm going to start with the slides that couple of, that we have not been doing mapping for a while, but, and that's because of COVID, because we had such low applications coming in the last couple of years. But as staff started to do the mapping, I actually found some of these slides really interesting, and I thought you folks would as well. And as each of the units start mapping the work that they're doing, that I think it would be of interest for you guys to see that. So this is a liquor applications, and this is for fourth quarter. And as you see there, we have the beer, wine, spirits restaurant license is probably the most frequently licensed application that comes in. And then you can see there that we also, from time to time, we get questions about wineries, like wineries say there's no new applications coming in. You can see there that 21 new applications came in for wineries with additional locations, so 10. And the same thing with breweries, that 10 brewery applications came in. And then these are the licenses that were issued. So again, that it doesn't always make sense, the number of applications coming in and the numbers issued, because it takes a matter of months in order for those licenses to get issued. We're going to become quicker at issuing those licenses, but certainly that these are the ones that have been issued. And then the last piece is on withdrawals. So I think it's also important to talk about those applications that after the applications come in is the applications that get withdrawn.
There's a lag.
Oh, okay. So we have about 199 applications that were withdrawn. Again, not a lot, but you can see there that a majority of them get withdrawn because we don't receive the documents, or because the applicants make the request for those applications to get withdrawn as well. And then, that about 11% is if we can't reach the applicants. And then again, if for some reason the opening date, so if the opening date is 2 years from now, then we'll ask them to withdraw their application and then go ahead and apply when they come to a closer date. Sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes for these big corporations, they need to apply for the license and get that process in place. And we always make exceptions, but we've really gone back to, asking folks that are applying for a liquor license, if they're not going to be able to get their license or their restaurant open in 90 days, that they wait to apply. It gives us an opportunity to work with the folks that are really ready to go.
Hey, Becky, I have a quick question. I know
Yes.
I know you said this, but can you remind me what the N is here? How many actual applications were withdrawn?
199.
190. Thank you.
Okay, that's it for these slides.
Within a quarter, Becky? Was
Yes,
that
within a quarter.
Within the
That's
3
right.
months?
Within 3 months. So I want to move on and talk a little bit about special occasion licenses that of course, we're seeing an increase, 585 licenses issued for special occasion licenses. And this is an area where customer service, it's a plus and it's a minus. So we, for customer service, our staff move on to be liquor licensed. They move on to be liquor investigators or our education and training unit. The problem with that is that we start to have folks that move on, and we're always training new people. So always about 3 people that a quarter that we train that are brand new employees. The plus to that, though, is that as we start to get behind, or we start to see an increase in applications, we're able to pull from other parts of our division in order to help us with issuing the special occasion licenses. So even though those are that we're beginning to creep up, we expect that they'll even get higher these next few months. At least until October, you'll see a lot of special occasion licenses being issued and applied for as well. And then the cannabis updates. I did want to share that we had a big push for, and it was a push that I pushed, that to issue licenses, to get those folks that were sitting out there, that we wanted to move things along in the cannabis unit. And so we actually moved in a month 57 licenses to final inspection and 81 to final approval. That's more than we've done almost in a year. So a big push to make sure that we do some cleanup. And that's so we could really see what our file counts are like. We wanted to be able to make changes in our process where we needed to have improvement. We also wanted to see, as other work is coming up, where I could shift resources. And so I am doing some shift in resources that we're sending a person from the cannabis unit to the training unit. And we're also sending a person to the adjudications unit, both places where work is going to start to increase. With training of our new system, it's taken a big hit on our training unit, and we just want to give them just a little bit more room so they have some depth in case somebody, that's sick, or in case we have more work to do. So again, it still doesn't, it won't affect the timeframes. That I will say that we haven't seen a big increase in the last 5 years in the number of applications or being processed. We do have one person that's going to be, of course, processing our social equity applications, specific, just one person, that's all he's going to do. But we also have others that have done that work before as far as issuing license campus. So we're prepared for whatever work comes along in that area as well. And then I want to share a bit about our training unit. As I mentioned, that this last, we've done quite a bit of training for, for our laserfish, that it's been very successful because of our training unit. That it's not just, that you always hear about Jody and Marcy and Jeannie, and, that certainly our training unit, though, really was able to provide more training. They created some tools. We're looking at what we can do with, the next step of S&P as well. That I asked that they reach out to each person, in each investigator, each person in our division, because it's not the people that you hear from that are having problems. It's the people that you don't hear from that are having problems. So they reached out to every single person to make sure that they are understanding if they have questions about the work, even though, that S&P was fantastic about offering, those folks about offering a time at noon in order to get help. The folks that need help aren't going to join that sort of listen and learn, or lunch and learn. They're going to be the ones that kind of sitting back, and you start to see them drowning in their work before they come forward. So, a special shout out to that training team. They've done a fantastic job as well. And then there's social equity. That March 1st was the date that we started receiving applications or accepting applications from business licensing services. I will say that, it doesn't matter how many times I say this, it's that there's 2 applications. The first one being business licensing services. There's no attachments. There's nothing but filling out the application. One of the challenges that we've faced here in the last week is that that business licensing application also gives you other applications or other things to pick from. So not just retail. They also have producer, processor, transportation license, and a research license. Right now, there's only one license available, and that's the social equity retail license. Separately, folks can apply for a transportation license. Separately, they can apply for a research license, but they don't have to be social equity applicants in order to apply for those licenses. So what we've done is that we've reached out directly to those folks that have applied for extra licenses and let them know that we're going to refund their money, and that those licenses right now aren't available for them to apply through social equity. And then the other piece of that is that, that after we've also sent out letters to those applications that we've received so far, and we've sent out the letters just to let folks know that we've received your application. Simple as that. Next steps will come in April. And with that, we've been working with our third-party vendor that myself, I'm challenged when it comes to the computer, as I always say. And so it was important for me to be able to go through and do testing, because I wanted to make sure that I understood where the bugs were, that how difficult that process is. And I will say that folks have to read the application. That is, as much as I was trying to quickly go through the application, it kind of tinged me when I was struggling to come back in and, hey, you didn't put the right date. And so that's a good thing. There's some tweaks that we've made that we've provided, but we're meeting weekly right now with Ponder, our third-party vendor, just to make sure they're ready for us to feel confident, for me to feel confident in the application process, and to know that it's moving along. We still have a couple of weeks for testing, and so we're just making sure that things are going to work like we expect for them to work when they start receiving all of our applications and start working with our applicants as well. We've also continued to get hits on our website, so I think that that's really a very much a plus. That that even though we took some time and we did the training, that training site is still available, that folks are still accessing our training site. They're still looking at some of our websites as well to make sure that that they understand the process. So again, it's only the beginning, but certainly we still have a lot of work to do. So with that, you have questions?
I have one about the application. You and I talked about this yesterday, but just to make sure. So if I applied and I, checked off transportation, you would call and say, hey, explain this. If the intention was to do a retail application, does that still happen then? Are you able to just take that into the system? They don't have to redo it?
Nope, they don't have to
Good.
redo it.
That's great.
No, we have explained to folks because people have applied and then said, whoops, I want to add somebody. There's no whoops.
Can't do that.
They cannot do
Right.
that.
But if they
once
check the wrong
apply-
box at the top, we can manage that.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
Just wanted to add, Becky, is that based on the last time we talked and what you were just saying there, I just wanted to offer our support and communications. Maybe we can send out a message that hits some of these little things, like when you go in there, you check this box, if you make sure your check is not bouncing, that kind of stuff we talked about.
Yes.
That'd be great. Good. Thanks, guys. Yeah. Great. Any other questions for licensing? Nope.
No, I just want to say, Becky, I enjoyed meeting your staff yesterday. That was a great division meeting you were having. I still stand true to, I don't know what happened to breakfast.
For those of you that don't know, we invited Ollie to join our division meeting, and that one, because it's Women's Month, and that Ollie just really embraces that strong women and strong leadership, and it was wonderful. It was I was sharing with David yesterday that it was nice for folks in my division to hear about Ollie, personally about Ollie, some things that they hadn't heard. And for those young folks who were upstairs talking about you later on, Ollie, about, that she met Martin Luther King, it was for them, it was a historical moment. And they really felt privileged to have had that time with you. And I don't know what happened to breakfast.
Thank you. And I actually got several emails from your staff.
No, that's
great.
Yeah.
Okay, next is enforcement and education with Director Chandra Wax.
Thank you. I'm managing a new pair of glasses, so I'm not sure how I'm supposed to see the slide distance and the close distance, but that will be my struggle today. You
Okay.
can laugh with me. We'll go ahead and get started. I'm excited because I shared with my team this month that the board wants to hear more about their partnerships. And so I'm going to leave some time at the end to be able to share that information, but they developed quite a list for you. So hopefully I can highlight all of those things. I always start on the first slide with just a glimpse at the licensees. And this is just the day that we pull the slides, we pull how many licenses that we're managing. And it's yeoman's work that they're out there doing. And the first thing I look at when I start looking at data and the work that our officers and employees are out doing in the field, they're big numbers. And so I just like to keep that in mind, especially when we're talking about the difference in percentages as it relates to liquor and cannabis and tobacco and vapor. So I always start with this. And then we'll dive right into it and start talking about complaints and the number of complaints that we received and processed by unit. And one of the things that we can look at is liquor stayed pretty steady across the last 3 months, to include December, January, and February. And you'll see that cannabis increased. And so we look a little bit closer at that and find that 40% of those complaints were internal complaints based on pesticide tests coming back. So we're getting a number of pesticide tests coming back. And so we open a complaint and look into that. And then if you look at tobacco and vapor, we see that those numbers reduced substantially. And when I look at that, I find out that last month we had a similar situation where there were manufacturers not using tax stamps correctly. And so there was a large number of internal complaints related to that. So if we move on and look at complaints, all right, glasses problem, and the nature of the complaints, one of the things we found already that's very different about 2023 is in the liquor unit. Last year in 2022, 47% of our complaints were related to public safety. And this year we're seeing 78% of the complaints related to public safety. And as you know, and you'll see a little bit more later in the data, the youth access issue is one that drives those public safety numbers. However, this year already, we've seen 146 of the conduct public safety complaints, drinking on duty and over service. So there's definitely an increase in that area that is actually showing an impact in data. And so just a different look when we start talking about our philosophy of starting with education so we can walk with our licensees in obtaining and maintaining compliance. You'll see education on the left, and then we move over and look at the AVNs, notice to corrects, and warnings. And you'll see that again, we're watching that notice to correct tool because it's a new education tool for us, and they're using that pretty heavily in the cannabis unit, which is good because we're documenting those expectations and education contacts with our licensees. You'll notice that we're 2 months into the first quarter, and you can see that we're going to exceed the number of education contacts across the division in the first quarter that we had in the last quarter of 2022, which is positive. And then also related to education, when we look at them across the different units, you'll see it's just a different look at it. The darker blue is 2021, lots of education there. You remember what that was related to. And then 2022, and then you'll see that 2023 is on target to exceed 2022. So those are all positive numbers even when we look at them year by year. And then this is just looking at the data a little bit differently and looking at specifically December, January, and February educational contacts. And you can see those numbers a little bit down for February in each unit. I suspect probably because there's fewer days in the month of February. And then when we look specifically at the education topics, one of the things that you will see is that the only change I'm seeing here is where it's at the fifth highest contact was traceability or CCRS, and tobacco education moved into there because of the master sales agreement and the tax stamp and that work that they were doing in the tobacco vapor unit over the last month or two. Otherwise, this is a very consistent outcome that we see, the top 5. Next, when we start looking at our violation breakdown for 2023, you'll notice on the left, the warnings and AVNs for liquor and tobacco, and then NTC warnings and AVNs for cannabis. This is just a look at so far what 2023 looks like. And then we move on to look more specifically at notice to corrects, which if you remember are just in the cannabis unit. You'll see those topics, and they're actually pretty evenly distributed this month. Things are kind of balancing out. We're not seeing one particular issue, but you can see there's a substantial difference in the things that are going to AVN, which are those youth access sales to folks under 21 versus things that we're doing education about and things that we're writing notice to corrects about. And so that's exactly what we want to see when we look at the data. Moving on to look at our administrative violation notices, or AVN, in February. Typically, and I would probably say almost every time I've presented here to the board, we've had all youth access. The top 5 are related to products sales to people under 21, but we're starting to see those conduct violations show up there. And they're not high numbers particularly, but we are seeing them. And then just that they're showing up at all in that top 5 is of note. And they are starting to impact our data even this early in the year. And then when we look more specifically at warnings, when they were presenting the slides to me this morning, we saw this selling product that contains cannabinoid over there on the right-hand side. So we're seeing that show up, and that is the CBD THC products in the vapor and tobacco locations that are our teams out there addressing those issues. So that's also showing up in the data. When we look at the alternative dispute resolutions, as you know, our goal is to resolve things at the lowest level possible. And you can see here that our staff continues to do that both in the liquor and cannabis industries. I did want to point out that our new finance director is going to be partnering with this team to walk through the process, learn how it works, learn at what point the finance decisions are made and then intake is made, both for learning the process and so that she and I can just review it and make sure we're good to go from an agency finance perspective moving forward. So that's our exciting news for next month. And then we're going to start talking about compliance, youth access specifically, which is always an exciting bit of data. When we look at these numbers in liquor, we're not seeing anything substantially different. We're maintaining a 81% compliance rate and doing over 200 of these compliance checks, which is, I always say to our staff and to this team, we have to remember that our staff's work is getting those compliance checks done and getting out there and doing the education and making sure that we're doing our work to prevent youth access. And then the licensees' work, their performance is measured in the compliance rate. It's important to highlight the work that our staff's out there doing in those 221 checks. And then we move on to delivery and curbside compliance. And you'll see that our numbers went up, and that was the great work of our operations team, knowing that as we're in session, there's going to be a lot more questions about this. There's bills looking at this issue. And so we wanted to make sure that every 500 times that Mark sent us an inquiry about this data, that we had some data to give him. So we had a 40% compliance rate and 20 checks. And so out of those 20 checks, 15 of those were third-party checks. And so I did want to highlight, we had 3 regions out there doing this work. So hats off to them. And an answer to how much time exactly did these take us? Because they take us a long time in prep work, in ordering, in setting up the hotel, in report writing, in working with the licensees. So we broke it out, and it is 6.1 officer hours per check. So just so that we realize that even just getting this data is a huge lift, especially when we start to consider our vacancies.
That number's for all checks or delivery checks?
Those are the delivery checks,
Okay.
right? And this is all delivery checks because that's what we've been talking about. So
And
that's,
Chandra, typically when you do a compliance check, what is the time that it takes so that people kind of know? Is it 2 and 3 times more?
well, I couldn't tell you like with the prep work and the after work, I can pull those numbers surely, but I having been on them, they'll take 10 to 15 minutes to walk in the door and complete it, or even a lot less. But you have to add in the planning and the driving and the picking up the IA and
Checking
but-
hotel and
yeah,
send that.
but 6 hours was probably 2 or 3 times what I expected it would
Yeah.
be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just great
Got a
work that
question from member Garrett.
A
Member Garrett?
question of curiosity on the delivery and the compliance check, is that strictly hotel delivery? Or is there some way we're doing it on residential delivery?
We're doing those at hotels.
Okay. All right.
So moving on to, if that's all of the questions, moving on to cannabis compliance, you can probably see, but I can't because I took my glasses off. We did 122 checks in cannabis with a 97% compliance rate. So both great number of checks and fairly
Huge
high
number of
compliance
checks,
rate.
yeah.
Yeah. So great work happening out there. And then when we start looking at tobacco and vapor compliance, we're at 113 checks and 80% compliance rate, which is exactly what we're seeing over in our FDA unit on the SINAR checks too. So
Chandra, it just begs the question from the last slide. Is it because we do more compliance checks with our cannabis retailers when we have so few compared to how many there are in the alcohol space? Because that's a really significant difference between liquor and cannabis. Is it because we make more checks?
it's because they card at the door.
Yeah.
It's because to enter one of these spaces, they card at the door.
And then,
in every single
and
location.
then hopefully
Wow.
check again at the cash
Mhm.
register.
Yeah, and then check again at the cash register and.
They did that
um,
initially when this rolled out, and then they kind of stopped.
Yeah.
And that probably led them back. I mean, it's interesting that
Yeah.
I didn't know that they were being checked at the door
Mhm.
now.
Jim,
So,
Valendra's got a question.
Board Member Volendroff?
Yeah, just going back to Ollie's question, it actually, I was wondering about the question, because when you asked it, Ollie, I got to thinking too about, okay, so what is the percentage of deliveries that actually happen at hotels versus homes? And then, what has any thoughts about that? First of all, what is the deliveries? Do we have data that shows the percentage of deliveries that actually happen to hotels versus private residences?
I don't have that, but I would
I don't
think
know that we know.
we wouldn't know that, because, but the third-party
We should be
companies
able to-
may have some
We could,
idea
we
of
certainly
that.
could
Yeah,
ask the.
we could ask the
third-party
third-party companies
deliverers.
if they have a breakdown.
But
And
didn't I just hear you say that we are not doing our own resident type delivery check?
Yeah,
We're not. Yeah, it sounds
So-
like, but
With
Well,
everything that we were looking at on the delivery of alcohol and delivery companies, it was all just, I won't say just, it was all based on hotel delivery.
yeah, and there's, some safety issues with using a residence that we have access to, right? Whether it's because it's an employee's residence or someone they know's residence, and then also renting any sort of residence long-term would create issues in that eventually, once you issue one violation, there's like this group text situation where everybody knows that's where the LCB is. So sometimes that just kills the night. And so if there was a residence that we'd secured for that.
No, I get that. I just didn't realize that the whole conversation around this and with the DoorDashes and the Uber Eats and everything of the world, that it had been strictly based on hotel delivery with alcohol. And maybe that's my lack of not know. I just didn't realize that was that.
which is one of the reasons why I was curious is what's the percentage? I mean, how often is it that they're delivering at hotels versus private residences?
Well, we're having monthly contact with our high-use third-party delivery companies because they're super interested, as you can imagine right now, in what this data looks like at the end of each month. So that's certainly a question when they ask us, hey, what does our data look like? I'll be happy to ask back, what does
Great.
your data look like?
Yeah.
It kind of begs, I hadn't thought about before, but so that means the licensee and the third party knows
Well,
that we're only using hotels,
yeah, and
which you
still,
would think.
Well, then that
Still-
should be 100%.
yeah.
It should be 100.
Yeah,
And still,
right.
we're
And
seeing
look how low it
40%
is.
compliance.
So that's something I haven't thought about, which they're tipped off that it's likely us.
Though I don't know that the licensee, if they're using a third-party vendor, knows where it's going.
No, but they do when the licensee's delivering it, because
Right,
there's,
right.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
If you're using a DoorDash,
Right. How
you
would
may
the
not ever
licensee
look
know
at where it's
that
going.
it's going
Yeah.
to a hotel?
You just know you're waiting for the DoorDash driver to show
Yeah.
up.
Yeah,
But would that make it why the third party delivery data and compliance and what is being said is so different than ours? Does their data include all of the deliveries with alcohol, where our data is only based on hotels?
I would say that their data is different because their data is assuming that when they're calculating their data, they're assuming that every time they didn't get caught, they weren't delivering to a youth. So they're using their total number is based on every delivery they ever made across the state, where our total number is the number of compliance checks we conducted. So they're basically assuming everyone was successfully sold to somebody under 21, and that's why the data is different.
But I think the data is wrong. That's not, that's a
Absolutely.
measure, that's not a measure of anything.
We would
Right.
know that 60% of those,
I mean, you
Cells
could
are-
extrapolate perhaps,
Yeah.
but to say 90% of our deliveries, we didn't get busted.
It's because
we
they
didn't get,
do
their
a
what,
lot.
what their data
Right, we
shows
don't- we
is
don't
we
have
didn't get
somebody at
caught.
every-
It
at
doesn't show
every
that they
sale.
didn't sell to a minor. It shows that they didn't get caught. So,
I
yeah,
mean,
you're
if
right.
they were doing their own maybe compliance check, that could help. But just to say, these are how many we delivered that the LCB didn't cite us for is not evidence that they didn't sell. So yeah, that's, and this the same is true for all of our compliance checks. We're just testing the ones that we test.
Right.
And so we go on a percentage, and if you see 40% here for delivering curbside, that tells you something. You see what the vapor one is overall. But yeah, it's like a public opinion poll. We're extrapolating from those numbers, but it doesn't mean that everyone not checked
Right.
was.
And I guess for me, what was confusing to me when we were kind of going on this subject of third-party delivery and restaurant delivery with alcohol is that I just know for me personally, anytime I've had alcohol delivered with my dinner, I can't get my dinner without showing my ID. I can't send anybody to the door. They're going to ask for my ID, and I can say I probably have tested that maybe every other Friday night. I ordered dinner and whatever, and like I'm going home and with alcohol. And that was what was confusing me when I was hearing that there was issues with that, because I have tested that quite, and I will say tested. I mean, that's just the way I've ordered quite frequent and didn't run into that. And so, and to me, if that became an issue for the third party person, then why deliver alcohol to a hotel? But this is interesting.
It is a very interesting discussion, and I think we've all been having lots of it, and there's a lot of different data out there. I'm in the respect of everybody's time, I'm going to move to the last slide. Everyone has the slideshow so they can look at some of the more minute data, but I do want to share the partnerships that a lot of my staff have been doing. Enforcement education works hard to work with others, and so I want to share that. We worked with the Washington Farmers Market. Thank you, Captain Dixon. Deputy Chief Repke and Captain Dixon worked with Seattle regulators, had a committee meeting with Seattle area licensees to look at the issues having some of the restaurants and bars surrounding the University of Washington. Licensing and enforcement sat on a panel to help train some of the new AAGs, which was outstanding and was a great partnership. Matt McCallum and our new education unit worked with the Stillaguamish tribe on some advertising education. Officer McKinney worked with Othello PD. They're going to partner with us on compliance checks. We worked with communications on the materials for the launch of our new education program on March 16th so that we can communicate internally and externally about that. Communications are always great partners when it comes to communicating with people. Deputy Chief Repke and Lieutenant Lambert. Oh, I already talked to you about the University of Washington meeting. Brian McQuay is our new liaison to the BRGs. So in enforcement and education, part of our strategic plan is to identify liaisons to many of our important partners. And so we're actually starting that task work of doing that. And so one of our folks in the examiner unit is going to liaison for us to the BRGs. We've obviously got new members and are participating in DEI, B, and PAIR. We are the enforcement. Lieutenant Moorhead is the safety committee chair now for the agency, which has been great. He's already been poking and prodding to make sure that we're following up on some of those tasks that we need to. We've worked closely with other limited enforcement agencies on House Bill 1132 for our professional standards training. And I'll just say that we've worked more closely with Mark Webster than I ever wanted to, but thank you for all of that help.
Thank you.
I'm just teasing. It's a great partnership. Just sometimes it's a lot during session, and I know it is for everyone. And then we've worked with HR and the union on use of force policy updates and position changes to make sure that we're in compliance with legislative changes for training and licensing and enforcement work together to revamp the discontinued business policy. And they've proposed that to Director Smith and I, and we're actually meeting today to review that before moving it on to the next level. And then we've worked with WASPIC and other agencies statewide we have now an app that we'll be launching to our employees for officer wellness. Lots of mental health and family work balance items that they can access right on their phones. And then we also volunteered to be social equity app testers for licensing. So lots of stuff out there happening. So we're always happy to brag on the work that they're doing. Unless you have questions, I'll pass it off.
Great. Any questions? Okay. Communications with Director Brian Smith. Brian.
Chair Postman and members Garrett and Bollendroff. Just to start off, a few things on the media front. We're continuing to see kind of a steady roll in of about 2 per day that come in, but there's no consistent themes that are happening right now. It's any number of issues. I just wanted to touch base on a few of them. If you remember at the last EMT meeting, we spent quite a bit of time talking about the Seattle Times article that had written about the new social equity program, et cetera. I just wanted to know that close the loop on that thing is that I did follow up with the reporter and the editor to have a meeting. The editor had to bag out at the last minute for a conflict, but I had a good meeting with the reporter about talking in person next time, picking up the phone and giving me a call and trying to be able to provide context to these types of things, which is, you remember last time, part of the issue was that it was back and forth via email and answering questions and wasn't able to get her to have a conversation about bigger issues. But I think we have an understanding there. Tomorrow, Becky and I are meeting with Melissa Santos of Axios to talk about the social equity program. And that is, as you know, she's a quality reporter and has been around and knows her stuff. And Axios being a national publication, et cetera. So Becky's ready for that. And I am working, I'm not going to go into the details there, but we're taking up some of your time, staff. Chandra working through an education with a lot of data type of stuff. So I know that what you're presenting today can help satisfy, I think, part of that request, I think. On the social equity front, you've heard me say the last few months that we've been working closely with Becky's team. You heard her say that people are using the website, but I got some data on that keeps getting better. If you remember, I talked back in January that the December data was showing that social equity unique hits on our website was at 31, which is out of 350 saved pages. I thought that was pretty good for each audience. But then up in January, it jumped all the way up to 11. And then I was really happy with that. And then this February is up to 7. So that's a real sign that people are going there and using. You're up there with banquet permits, mass training, that kind of stuff. And this is a niche audience. Right. And so we know firsthand that people are doing that. That was one of my goals. Our goals is that we drive people to the website to get the most current information and that they actually do that.
So it was the 7th most used.
Yes.
Okay.
Visited, yeah. Yes. And so we always have it in the top 10. You have things like banquet permits, which is what people need. They can get them online, our homepage, mass training kind of stuff. So to get social equity all the way up among those was, it's good. So let's keep it rolling. But right now we needed them in February to be looking at it, and they did. I'm just trying to be helpful where I can on the legislative stuff, whether it's testimony or Mark asked one time for Justin and I for some help with an explainer on the THC stuff, and trying to be readily and available. And as we roll over into the House, I would imagine there's going to be more of that with new bill hearings, et cetera. Try to work with Rick Rivercant. He's got a speaking engagement. I'm sure he'll talk about that coming up, and I'm doing what I can to be able to help there, get our message across at the summit. Becky's going to be there too with a panel. I first say that. One thing that came out of the last board meeting was we had a stakeholder get up there and speak about using consumer education on our website, particularly in the cannabis space. He noted that the pages had been down. We had taken them down
at my request, actually for Mary, until we got those updated, et cetera. So it was funny is that I took what he had to say to heart and went back and I got a hold of Mary, but she had already heard from board member Vollendroff, in the matter of minutes. And then I heard from Chair Postman on it, 10 minutes later. So we're all of the same mind. I want everyone to think is that Mary has someone that she's brought on short term to help her build up those pages. And I don't know if Mary or this new person is totally, I don't know if any of us are been drafting this type of content for the website, but I offered up Julie on my team and my perspective to be able to help build out those sites to be able to get the right type of information that we'd want. So just know for this group that we all kind of care about that, and we're going to try and get some quality info. I see board member Vollendroff has a question or comment.
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you. I just want to make a quick comment. And, I think it really points out the value of board participation. Here we have somebody come, they bring up an issue, a legitimate issue, and look at the response that individual got. And so I keep using that as an example to individuals that I talk to in the community, got a unique opportunity to talk to the director, to all three board members, to the directors of each of the divisions within the LCB, et cetera. So I really appreciate everybody's quick response. And the issue that Bailey brought up, I thought was really good. We do it on the alcohol side. We talk about responsible drinking. And so why are we not doing that on the cannabis side? I think it's really important. And then finally, we're taking Bailey up on his offer to help us look at that information so that we're actually getting feedback from the community before we actually post it, so that we're actually getting consumer input into the final product that gets posted. So I appreciate everybody's support on that.
Yeah, and the other thing that I find interesting is we're melding the normal view, normal NORML, with Bailey, with the public health and prevention, who don't always look at the same thing the same way, but they both have an interest here. And if we can get them to work together with us, and Mary, how do you do the responsible use, but not make it look like you're promoting or encouraging, and which I think is totally doable. So I agree with what you said, Jim. I think it's really good to see happening.
And that will be a dance. So we were all sort of thinking the same thing. We're probably weren't the only ones in the same room that thought that was time for some of that too.
Well, the thing that I mentioned to Brian, which he was, remember when we did our 10th anniversary conversations with the public health researchers, they talked about the need to talk to people about responsible use too, and to sort of evolve that talking some. So the time is right.
Yep, great.
Yeah, thanks.
And as Jim, Ollie, you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, and this is just a comment. I think that because I don't want for folks that's been part of the whole board meeting and board process to say, well, wait a minute, we were doing this all alone. And I'm saying that to say normally and before COVID, the board meetings were in person. And when someone like Bailey would come or anyone else would come, the person that they would need to talk to would also be in the room. So it has always been that normally when someone brings up something, and Kathy would be in the room, it has to do with rules. The chair would say, oh, such and such is here. They can meet with you right after the meeting. So I'm just saying to say that process was in process in the in-person environment.
Jim, did you have something to add, or you just still have your hand up?
No, I'm sorry. I haven't taken my hand down.
I see that Bailey's in the room, and I bet he's smiling because he's heard now from all the board members his name. So just going forward. Yeah, the briefing packet. I've talked to each of the board members as that we'll be preparing for the new director coming on board. I had drafted an outline that Rick has reviewed and has some input for me that I'll be getting tomorrow. And but I will be in contact with working with the divisions, working with the board, make sure that we capture all that stuff for that, because it will be so important to get that person up to speed quickly with what they need to know. And then just lastly, we have the newsletters which come out quarterly. Will be coming out later this month, first with cannabis, following with to alcohol, which is always kind of a push between me and my team to get all that information together, and the divisions, of course, that submit a lot of that, to get that ready and out the door. It's an important communication tool for the people that we aim to reach. And then just lastly, I'm sure Tony will talk about SMP, but Julie is the lead for my team and does all the communications on SMP primarily. They, along with a lot of other things, have remained in the green. So she's doing a great job there on the SMP and takes up a lot of time.
Great.
That's it. Brian.
Okay, Justin Nordhorn, Director of Policy and External Affairs. There you are, sir.
Good afternoon, Chair Postman, members Garrett and Ballendroff. Have a few updates. I'll piggyback off of Brian. So thanks, Brian, for sharing most of what I needed to share on the education page. So just to highlight a couple things, we brought on the temporary person in mid-February. So February 13th, I believe, was their start date. And we're anticipating that the project should be completed by the end of April. And that's what we're targeting, because it's not a full-time position, it's just part-time, but Mary and Liz are working on that as we speak. They're meeting together. And so there's definitely movement going on that front. We have a number of issues that have happened over the last few weeks. So yesterday we had a presentation, which we'll probably have a further conversation with, and then also potentially bring it to the other board members. But we had a presentation yesterday of a capstone project that I had mentioned before around the medical cannabis research. Was very informative. Some new information was shared during that, so we want to have a little bit further discussion. But we're thinking about following up with that in the future, and I don't know if the board members would like to see something like that at caucus. So there can be a broader conversation, or if we want to just set up some meetings with the researcher, or how you guys would like to proceed on that type of engagement.
I think it's probably a great caucus conversation and presentation, because I think all three of us would like to engage.
Excellent. Okay, we'll make a note of that and move that forward. And then we also have speaking of Bailey, so I'm glad he's in the room, because I'm going to give him some kudos as well. We had a really nice, robust conversation with him yesterday around the social consumption proposal that he wanted to talk to the agency about. And we spent about an hour and a half going over everything. And what I'll say is, we didn't necessarily agree on everything, but he has a lot of great ideas in there. And he also took a lot of time and diligence on identifying risks that are associated with a bunch of variables before we even came into the meeting, which I was actually really impressed with. So I don't always get that from folks when we're interacting on proposals. So wanted to put compliment out there for Bailey, because I think that really showed a lot of forethought into the proposal and presentation. So hopefully we were able to have a good back and forth from his perspective, and offering some feedback and other considerations. So we're going to be looking forward to continuing that conversation as we can look at potentially what impacts may arise for next year. We also have a informal sampling session, informal rule development session.
The old days.
Yeah, all of a sudden my
staff?
invites just spiked off the roof, right? So
Where do
we
we
put
sign
out
up
an
for?
invite. We put out an invite for an informal discussion on our education and vendor sampling.
Okay.
So with the industry. So that's going to be later this month. And so far, we're going to be doing that in person. And what I'm trying to do is create a fairly safe environment for licensees to be able to share with us the current state of affairs going on right now. Not necessarily what the current rules are, what the current law is, but what's happening and what are they doing, what potentially may be working best. And we want to create that environment so they're comfortable sharing that information without feeling like somebody's going to come out and have a chat with them afterwards or something along those lines. So we're not going to be recording that session, but we do want to have a very robust conversation. So it's a 2-hour meeting on the 22nd of this month. And so far we have 19 people that have signed up. 14 for in-person, and we're also having a listening session online. So we have an additional 5 that have indicated they would like to do that. So we've had some requests from some folks ahead of time to say, We've mentioned that we want to share the state's interest points around this, and they've asked for that information ahead of time for the meeting. So I'm working on that for them. And hopefully we'll be able to get that out this week to those folks. We also have some discussions. I'm really pleased so far with how our tribal program is developing. Marla is just doing a fantastic job in reaching out and coordinating with the tribes. We're having really good conversations. We had a great open dialogue earlier this week with a lot of point counterpoint. I thought it was a really healthy discussion. And the end result is we came to a consensus that you will likely be approached with. We're looking at potentially opening up a CR 101 around the trade area issues. And I think it's really important for the agency to look at that from a policy standpoint. And so we believe that, bringing this to the board in a more formal manner and opening it up for a transparent process is going to really be effective in having that discussion in an open manner. So we're looking forward to presenting that to you. So you'll be hearing more about that. But if you hear something in the background, that's kind of what's going on. We also have reached out to Oregon. We had a good conversation recently with them, the Board of Health in Oregon, around psilocybin, because we had some interest from the legislative process that we may be asked or tapped to be involved in it. And that was before it switched into a study. But we had set this meeting up. And so we're trying to figure out, okay, what does the state of the market look like? How large is it? What kind of interests are there? And so we gathered a lot of good information around what they're anticipating in Oregon for those. And so when the study begins, if the bill passes and we have this study, we'll have some materials already available to bring to the conversation. So I think that that's going to be pretty valuable in that front. We also have a rules evaluation program going on for the quality control rules. And so it's interesting. This is our first one that we're actually trying to do with stakeholders around, did our rules work as intended? So a little rocky start. The last conversation was really productive, but we realized that we need to go back and look and bring forward a lot of agency data, I think, to inform some of the further conversations. So that's our next steps in that, is we're going to start trying to figure out how we can extract some of the data. And we may not have all of the data points that were needed because I'm not sure how strong the baseline data availability was, but we're going to take a look at that. So hopefully we can share that with the work group and help that inform that conversation as it continues to move forward. So I think those are the highlights that we have. And just to kind of follow back up on Member Vollendroff's point of consideration on the pair issues and always having that in front of us, that's really where that tribal discussion foundational piece is how is this impacting different communities across the state? Are our rules, and we don't necessarily have the impact right now on RCW, but for the rules section, are we having rules in place that create barriers or disparate treatment to different communities? And that was really the epicenter of a lot of that conversation on, we need to relook at this because of some of those equity issues. And so I really appreciated hearing that, because we're doing that and driving that home on all of these policy conversations. So happy to answer any questions, but and I was going to share, I don't think this is in our state yet, but my staff shared with me this morning a Sunny Delight vodka product that's now hitting the shelves somewhere in the United States. So I don't think it's in our state, but Sunny D vodka, interesting, ready to drink option out there. So kind of alarming when you think of that as predominantly a kid's drink, Sunny Delight. So not sure where we're going to go with that, but just food for thought anyways.
Yeah, thank you for that. So you can't wait for the high C juice box cocktails and everything else. I just want to second what you said about Marla stepping up and doing that. And it's been really, we've had some really good discussions around this. And Justin, also thank you for the leadership, particularly on the issue we're just talking about, that where we really did have to see our way through a path to, and Ollie, we thought of you, which was, how do we get to yes? Like, you know, we understand the problems here, but is there a way to make this happen? And what would that look like? And it was hit and restart. So appreciate your leadership through that, Justin. I think it's going to work out great, and I look forward to the board conversation about it. Okay, thank you. Next up is Deputy Director Tony Hood for General Agency Update.
Thank you, Chair Postman and members, Drop and Garrett. Oh, I guess I do. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Got two microphones. Okay, I'm going to talk about our priority initiatives and the timeline. I know there's a lag. Justin's going to bring this up. And there it is. There was no lag. So this is what I've shown you in the past. I'm going to first mention what's not on this timeline anymore, and that is CCRS. So we are taking CCRS off this timeline because it's no longer a project. It is in its operational stage, and it will be continually maintained by internal IT staff. Any changes or tweaks that need to be done will be done by those internal IT staff, but it's no longer in a project status, which is good. And at the top of the chart, we have Laserfish, which of course released. We had our go live February 13th, and that yellow section indicates our post go live support. As Becky mentioned, we had office hours available where her internal training team was there with our OCM people to answer questions. They actually offered those 7 times. They called them office hours. I think they were during lunch, as you mentioned. Just an informal way for staff to come in and ask questions. The internal LCB training team also developed guides, as Becky mentioned, and they were available for questions, which was awesome. On Laserfish, we sent out a pulse survey on Monday to find out how people are feeling about the rollout. This is an important part of our OCM work, to do that survey and see what people think. So those are just 3 short questions, and we'll get that data back soon. The OCM team is also doing some videos regarding the Laserfish rollout per licensing's request to kind of assist further with training and capture that in a video. So they're working on that right now. The next item on this slide is Salesforce. We are just finishing our first sprint with Salesforce. Tomorrow we have our first demo. I'm very excited to see the first demo of the first sprint. We have some of our Accenture partners here in the building with us this week, and they'll be with us tomorrow for the demo. I'm sorry, I'm going to back up one moment. Next week, we are also doing lessons learned on the Laserfish rollout. So we have a special session set aside to do lessons learned so that we can improve our training for the first Salesforce rollout, which is in June. So we will be working with our OCM people and our internal trainers to make improvements on that. So again, tomorrow we'll have our first demo on Salesforce. And as Brian said, we are in the green. We are at 2.6. And what that means for our quality assurance rating is the lower the number, the less the risk. So it's quite awesome that we're at 2.6. I think the team is just doing a fabulous job documenting everything, which helps lower our risk. And they are doing a good job of following our governance plan, which also helps the risk, and communication is key so that we don't have sudden problems that obviously can create risk.
Jenny, and that's the first time everything would have been green since the restart, right?
No, I think last month we were at 2.8, which was,
Oh,
we've been green for.
Schedule at yellow, okay.
Oh, you know what? You might be right, because that is an average. That number is an average. So you're right. This is the first time we were.
I only bring it up to say is that
yes,
we don't start at green.
we don't start at green. No,
It you know, and some of these lagged on for a while and took a lot of work.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was interesting to watch that kind of.
yes, you're right. That schedule,
came along and-
getting that schedule completed to their satisfaction, to all of the outside consultants' satisfaction, took a long time.
Yeah,
And it's great that that's green now
Yeah.
and keeps us on track.
yeah, it's going
Yeah.
well. Thanks.
So that's all I have for Salesforce. And social equity has already been discussed. That's just the regular timeline that you have seen before. Later on down the road, there'll be more things in June and July. We also have up on there internet update. That's going through IT mostly right now.
Yes.
And we have asked that all divisions try to spend some time cleaning up their internal pages and external pages so that when we transfer over to the new system, we're up to date. During COVID, I think that there was kind of a lack of attention to some of the documentation that's internally posted. And so I think we have an opportunity to clean it up and transfer with fresh information, up-to-date information. We also know now that when we're working remotely and really used to working electronically, that we don't need to post so many lists and documents. Some of that information no one's using there. So let's clean it up. You know, Brian and I just talked about, there's this old phone list that was updated in 2016. No one's looking at that, so we can clean that stuff up because we have Outlook, which gives us lots of information that we need. So, and then legislative session, of course, is at the bottom. So I'm done with that chart. I just, as was mentioned by Jim Weatherly, we have our June 6th staff recognition event coming up, and Gloria and her committee are doing a great job setting up speakers. I know Rick's had a lot of good input on suggestions on speakers, so we're getting very excited about that. Rachel, our new CFO, is here today, and she has really jumped right in to her job since starting February 1st. And just as, I think sometimes we forget that finance actually means operations as well. So that means public disclosure unit, it means facilities, safety issues, risk management, and contracts. So she's been quite busy getting up to speed, spending some extra attention, as Chandra mentioned, on safety issues that the safety committee brought up that we need to follow through on. And lastly, I attended yesterday an Office of Equity meeting regarding the community compensation policy that you heard about, the RCW, that allows us to do compensation for certain in certain areas. And as Jim said, we finalized our policy. And I'm happy to report that after listening to the presentation from the Office of Equity, I believe we're on the right path. We have done what we need. And I'm also very impressed with the Office of Equity's website. They are giving us a ton of information for people. So if we have someone that we think we want to give compensation to, but we're not sure about how that will affect other services that they might receive, all of that information is on the Office of Equity website. So that's really going to help us use that policy correctly. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any questions for Tony? No, we'll go to Director Rick Garza.
Don't have a whole lot. You know, I didn't know Jim was going to leave because I should have said something before he left us. But I just kind of like Jim, who's been part of our pair team and the work with the Diversity Council. Just really impressive how proactive he is. If you look at the tracker that he created, it's a quadrant, you know, all the work that he's been doing. And we have the good fortune of meeting with him, Anita, I, and Tony, often to just walk through the work that he's doing. But I just can't say enough about how detailed and organized he is. And if you look at that tracker, all the work that he's done this last year, and when I say proactive, I mean he pushes.
Oh, yeah.
We've got a lot of work to do in this agency, and I appreciate the fact that the board talked about this DEI work that we're doing is not just extra work. It's the core work that we need to do the next year to really, you know, the years that I've been here, it fits the path of our culture document to move to where we're going, to being an agency that people feel they belong to. And the whole idea of having our first get together in 4 years, and that the theme is coming together is a great opportunity and it's been way too long to celebrate with our employees for that day. And met with Tim Gard this morning, who's a comedian that we used, who's also a motivational speaker, that was with us the last time we were together, and just had a great discussion with him about how he would present. And then we have some other folks that we haven't gotten commitments from, but I think will be wonderful additions as far as speakers to the event that we're having. And hopefully they'll be able to join us. But really looking forward for all of you to enjoy that that time. And some of our folks who haven't had the opportunity to be part of that with us, with so many new employees and board members also. So really looking forward to that. You know, Mark, all three bills are out of the House of Origin. Bills that struggled last year, bills that I figured, you know, we'll see how we do. But the THC bill went out unanimously. That bill could go nowhere last year or struggled so much. So same with the social equity proposal. So it's not just those bills, it's the detail. It's the input that we're providing, the changes that we're making to bills, because we have concerns in conjunction with the governor's office, in conjunction with the board members who are helping and sharing how they can help us through the process. So I know we got a long ways to go, and I'm sure there's the issues that are already happening that I'm not even aware of today with those bills. But it's just really been, from my perspective, from where I'm looking at, for you, you're doing all the work, just smooth. And I just think you're just doing a wonderful job. And I just have to say that, as we've got, you know, another 30 days of work for you to do for us, but it looks really good. Appreciate the information and licensing. When you brought up those slides, I was thinking, you know me, I'm going to immediately say, so how does it trend, right? Like, we know during COVID, a lot of people lost their licenses. And what does it look like since? Because are we just getting back to where we were as far as licensing counts, or are we? And I think you've shared this information in your divisional meetings, the last one that I was at, but maybe even sharing with us and the board at the next meeting. Becky, just how does that look compared to pre-COVID, COVID, and where we're at? Because I think one of the things I liked that I heard that you did, and you had shared this with me, was you were seeing that there were some cases out there that were outstanding, and you were proactive enough to say, we can't have that. We're gonna change that. We're gonna go look specifically at every file we have that has been beyond a certain number, and we're gonna work on those now. We're gonna get them done now. So that's just, I just want to appreciate that. And then Chandra, you always do such a nice job of, you know, sharing the trends. And then I think the pieces that bring together the work that you're doing with others. I was thinking about Jim in the pair meeting where we talked about the subcommittee that you're going to head up. And I was thinking about the team, because remember you were saying, well, how do we get the community involved? One of the things that sometimes we don't realize, especially where I'm at, is all the community involvement that's occurring now, that you're doing, that licensing's doing, that communications, I mean, everybody's involved. And so the first piece of that, Jim, was an assessment, right? Let's figure out what already exists, and then let's do more. But I think that was because of the discussions we have here and in other meetings, where I realized I'm not even aware of the different ways every day that our employees are touching the community out there. And you'd be surprised how often that happens. So that's going to be good work, Jim, to continue that, and then use the pair team to even be broader in that discussion than just the folks that we are talking to. You know, I was thinking of that slide you had that had the pesticide complaints up. I'm wondering, Chandra, if that has to do with the board's action to require pesticide testing for all product. That maybe, is it complaint based, or is it just testing that's being done and the product isn't passing and it's having to be removed?
It's the timing of the testing coming back. And so when there's a delay in the labs, or a lot of times a lot of them will come back at one time. And so when that happens, but yeah, it's a direct result of some of those results coming back. and us needing to look into ones that aren't within threshold.
And then I think tomorrow we have Senate confirmation hearings for our board members, which I think in all the time I've been here, I've never had all three of you up at the same time and early. So looking forward to that tomorrow. And then just the great work that our consultants doing and Anita in HR to help us find the new director, and the work of the board in helping us in that and all that work, and the survey that was done that David just shared on Monday. So I remember thinking early that this was too early to be doing this work. The timing looks like it's going to be just about right, David. So that's all I've got. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be still lucky to get it all done in
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
but yeah, the search firm told us they got 60 responses already from our employee survey, which really blew them away. They said more than they would have thought in total, and that was all for a couple of days. So that's good. And they're going to compile all that and then they'll share it with us. That'll be good. Other questions, comments, reports from board members? Okay, great. With that, we will adjourn today. I look forward to seeing both you tomorrow morning. A rare opportunity for us to be allowed to be all in the same room together. So, we'll see how that goes. Okay, thanks, everybody. Thanks for all the reports. We are adjourned.